Welcome. Thank you for joining us for Tackling Topic 4. I'm Ruth. I'll be the moderator for this evening's event, and we're just so glad that you're here. We've had some exchanges in the chat already about different situations throughout the world about the weather and how things are going. So thank you for doing that. Just keeping aware of the chat. Be sure that when you do view the chat and use the chat, that you send it out to everyone so that everyone can see it, including Dan, because you might want to ask some questions and share some comments. I'm Ruth. As I said, I'm your moderator, kind of behind the scenes, helping point and click. The chat feature, if you haven't found it yet, there's an icon. Sometimes it's in the bottom right. It looks like a message bubble, so you can find that. Be sure to send out to everyone so that everybody gets them. And our presenter tonight is Dan. Over to you, Dan.
Hello. Thank you, Ruth. Welcome, everybody. I'm just scanning through where everybody is from right now. And I love seeing just the wide range. Blows me away every month when we do this, just where everybody's from. So hopefully for those people who are having some weather issues this evening and into tomorrow, I hope you're all safe and warm. Here in South Carolina, we are just rainy and a little cold, so we're lucked out compared to others. So welcome. My name is Dan Wilkie, and this is, wow, our sixth webinar that we've done this year with TI and IB information. So we've been trucking along and hopefully helping out as many people as we can. I welcome you. Just thanks for our repeat customers. It's awesome to see you back again. I have seen a few familiar names, so thank you. That means I'm actually doing something to help you out a little bit. And to our newcomers here, thank you so much for trying us out and hopefully getting some information from us that will help you finish off this year strong and then into years to come in our effort to do better in IB and better for TI. If we could help out, that's great. Just a little bit of background about me, and this is my 26th year of teaching, and it's been a very interesting journey. And it was about 17, 18 years ago when I was introduced to IB, and it's just been, it was a little tough to start to get a handle of it, but every year that I do it, I just kind of, just love it more and more. And then it's been about 7 years now that I've worked with Texas Instruments. And when they approached me to kind of combine the two and kind of work with them to help everybody we can with IB, it was just like everything coming together for me. And I just love that. I'm a like I said, I've taught for 25 years. I've taught for the last 3 years at Christ Church Episcopal School in Greenville, South Carolina. And, it's just, I do teach IB Math Analysis and Approaches SL. And then I'm also an examiner for Applications and Interpretations for Paper 1. And I'm also a moderator for the Math Exploration. So it's a busy time of year coming up pretty soon. So we start in April and then it goes to June with all of our grading and moderating and all that stuff. So what I'd like to do in these webinars that hopefully you get something out of, I'd just like to share a little bit of my insight, what I've seen through the change in the new curriculum, how the exams went, how the grading went, what we saw in the IAs. And then each of our webinars, we've done a focus. We kind of tackle each topic one by one. And today's topic is, all about statistics and probability. So let me share my screen so we can jump right in. Okay. So, and keep the chat going. What I also love about these webinars is we get usually between 80 and just over 100 people who are with us. And the vast majority of you are IB teachers. Now, there are some that are not, and thank you for showing up. Hopefully, I don't bore you too much with my IB talk. But what I love is that if I'm talking about something and there's a question in the chat box, maybe that I didn't see or I didn't get to right away, other people could know the answer and they share those answers. And that's great. So keep those chat questions coming. I'll try to get to as many as I can. And then I know there's other people who will help out. So like I said, just kind of keep that going. So having said that, all right, today we are tackling topic 4, statistics and probability. So let's just kind of do a quick overview of what we're going to see today. And if you've been to one of my webinars before, we kind of have a pattern of things. We go over what's new in the curriculum because of the curriculum change after the first exam last year. Then I talk about after grading one May session, what did I notice? What stood out in that exam session? And then this is a big one because anybody who's taught studies before, there's a lot of statistics in our math explorations or our studies papers and that has carried over into the math exploration. So the vast majority, I'd say about 85 to 90% of the papers that I grade are statistics papers. So there are some things that definitely stick out and I'd like to share with you with that. We'll go over some 84 and Nspire kind of tips, because there's specific menus dedicated to probability and statistics. So if you don't know where they are, if you haven't used them, I'd like to share those with you. And then we'd like to talk about what is TI doing to kind of help IB out? And kind of what am I doing with TI? And we have been writing new activities. We've been enhancing old activities, kind of putting an IB spin on them. So we're going to take a look at 2 activities, maybe scan a third, we'll see. So I'm excited about a couple of them that I worked on. So I'd just like to share those with you. And then I would like, some feedback from you. Just kind of let me know if you have any suggestions from topic 4 that you would like to see. Every webinar that I do, I get some wonderful information, wonderful ideas. I have my little notebook here that I write down the stuff that you share with me. So please keep the ideas coming because every year we do about 8 to 12. I'd say actually we do that twice a year. So we do about 16 to 20 enhancements or new activities each year. So I'm pretty excited about that. All right, and just to kind of, I'd like to give you all some feedback too, because like I said, I love the chat that happens during the webinar, but I also love afterward. You get to fill out a survey. And we hear some wonderful things from people. People are very excited about these. They give me some good feedback on, maybe pace and stuff like that, how we can get things better. There's one thing that I'd like to share. Some of you mentioned how it'd be good to see, some sample examples like of IAs or exam questions or stuff like that. But I am not allowed in this format to share IAs with you all, or I can't bring up exam questions and talk about them. All I can really show or share with you is kind of my feelings, my insight, what I've seen, and then any exam questions that I have created working with TI to kind of go forward. So I would honestly love to be able to sit here and pull up some IAs and exams and just kind of go through them with you. But that's kind of a no thing with what IB lets me do. So I just want to kind of say that, kind of going forward. I wish I could though. I really do. I really, really do. All right. So let's just jump right in to what is new in the curriculum, because as we made the switch, and we're kind of getting into, being more comfortable with the material, but it's still nice to see what was different, what was added, what was changed about, in topic 4, in the statistics and probability. Because if you were unaware, things were shifted around. And again, yes, thank you, Michael. That is correct. If you want to see examples and how things were graded, you can definitely go to MyIB and check under the the teacher support material. So thank you for sharing that. But if you were unaware with the new stuff that was kind of thrown in, a lot of stuff was kind of moved around. So there was a lot of topics that were always there, but they were moved from either studies to the applications class or studies to the analysis class. So things were just kind of shuffled around. Now there were a few new topics that weren't, in either courses. But I would just like to kind of go over a few of them that I noticed because as I was scanning through the new material, and first, in the applications and interpretations class, the idea of sampling was definitely bolstered up. So there's going to be a question on the exam about sampling to discuss. And that was one of the activities that I was going to go over a little bit later on. That was a new one. So there is an idea of sampling now included. So also binomial distribution has now been kind of put in the applications and interpretations compared to the studies class that it wasn't there. And also not just doing Pearson's R value, the correlation coefficient, but now also Spearman's. They also did a second chi-squared test, okay, the goodness of fit test, the t-test, which is another activity that I hope we get to see today. Did a little activity with that. Then also using p-value in comparison of means of two populations. There was actually a question on last year's exam, the May exam, that kind of stood out to me with that exact idea of comparing the means of two populations. And students struggled with the wording of how to answer that question. I think they had the right idea, but they just couldn't get the wording down. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. One and two tail tests, and then also dealing with nonlinear regression. But that was kind of the HL only. So me, I normally just deal with SL type level information as of right now, just to kind of get a base of activities and material for TI. And then the hopes is that once I get a nice base going, then I can advance and do some more higher level information and activities and stuff like that. But as you should be aware of right now, there is core content in all of the courses that is the same throughout, which I'll talk about on the next slide because I found it quite interesting with the examination and what I noticed last year. For the analysis and approaches class, a lot of the stuff is the same. Okay, so between AI and AA courses, there was a lot of overlap with the statistics and probability. I just noticed a few things that maybe were a little different in the analysis and approaches class, which basically dealt with, finding a regression line of X on Y instead of Y equals, it's X equals. So that was a little different, a little new. And then using an equation for prediction purposes. So doing that kind of extrapolation or interpolation. So I always include, and I'll just show it to you real quick. I always include this file for you to use to look at what's new. So this is part of the materials that you can open up on the TI website that you get with the webinar. So this should be part of it. You can just kind of scan through. It's color coded and shows you what's new, what's been moved around from course to course. And then at the end, it also tells you what's been taken out. So if I go all the way to the end, sorry for the quickness, it also tells you what's been taken out of the courses. So this is included if you want to use it. Take a look at it. I love that document. It helps me out tremendously, especially when I'm doing my activities, just to kind of scan through those. Okay, so items that stood out for me from the May 2021 exam session. And this was kind of interesting because I'm just going to jump down to the bottom one here. It says questions that were used for both SL and HL. So as I mentioned earlier, there's material that is called the core content. So when you're in your AI course and you have, the standard level and higher level, there are certain questions on the exam that overlap. So there's a handful of questions that are on both the standard level and the higher level course. And I witnessed that for the first time as I was grading last May. I got to see a nice little spreadsheet of, which of the questions kind of overlapped with them and how they were answered at both levels. So I found that quite interesting. And the same thing for analysis and approaches. They have, there's a handful of questions on both the higher level and standard level courses that are the same. And that's part of the core content. And that's what they wanted to do. And then in addition to that, remember that core content spans over all 4 courses. So there is, I think it's about, it's like 50 or 60 hours worth of material that is the same for all 4 courses. And then if you look at that sheet that I just showed you, and I just said I wasn't going to go back to it, but I will. But if you look at, there's little stars, little asterisks by them. That's the core content that's shared in every course. So in this, 4.5, which is basically dealing with probability of events, complementary, expected number of occurrences, that sort of thing, that's covered in all 4 courses. So you'll kind of see that, on this sheet. And that's another reason why I like this. It kind of really gives you a nice visual of all the courses there. So just kind of looking at some of the questions that stood out to me with probability and statistics. My students in particular, there was one question. It was an incredibly difficult box and whisker question where it involved the upper and lower quartiles, so Q3 and Q1, and you had to relate it to the outliers and do some solving using some inequalities. And that when they came out of that exam, they felt that was the most challenging question to answer, which I was scratching my head at. But then when I saw it and then I did it and I said, I can understand. And that's an IB thing. They love to get you to think outside of the box. Even though a student might know how to deal with a box and whisker plot and know how to find an outlier, they gave you a question in a way that was very challenging, to first comprehend what they were asking and then how to figure it out. So I really found that was quite an interesting question on that analysis and approaches paper 1 question. And there was this, and it's funny because I was just giving a review packet to my students last week, and there was this very long paper 1 question that dealt with biased dice. There were 2 4-sided dice, and they had to deal with a probability distribution for each, and then they had to find the expected value for each, and they weren't given all the information. So it was a very long problem to deal with. And they struggled. They dealt with the first bias die okay, but then they struggled with the second. And then there was a final question that kind of brought both dice together, and they definitely seemed to struggle there. So it was an interesting problem that we got to see using a probability distribution, expected values. And then honestly, just solving systems of equations thrown in there too, when you had to solve for multiple variables. So I definitely found that was a bit of a challenge, a bit of a long problem, and the kids had to be on their toes for that. So one thing I love about IB, because I always preach this to my classes, and I hope you all do too, is when you are graphing and doing stuff like that, I always really preach to my students, make sure you use a straight edge, and I'll always take off for it if you don't, because for one, I want them to have some pride in their work. I want them to make it look nice, neat for me. But also, if you're in an IB class, they will take off if you don't use a straight edge, and that's in the mark scheme. So if you have a regression problem and they ask you to, estimate and draw your line of regression, of course, they're looking for it to go through the mean of the points, but also it has to be a straight line. So if it's not a straight line, they lose credit. So just throwing that out there, make sure you're getting your kids to use a straight edge whenever possible. So another challenging, and what I noticed this a lot in the May session is there were a lot of questions where students had to do more talking. that I've noticed before, where they had to do explaining or writing out their solutions or explaining why they did it, the reasoning behind it. And one of those stood out to me is they had a box and whisker, and they had to use the percentages, the 25% mark, the 50, the 75% mark, and then use that in a justification to their answer. So, and I've noticed that with like I said, in both the AA and the AI question, the exams, that there was more. AI does not have a non-calculator section. That's all calculator, Lynn. So thank you for asking. So it was interesting to kind of see at least they did in the May session. They took more of a, all right, for certain questions, they wanted students to explain themselves a little bit. So that was quite interesting to me. And then I seeing the t-test used for the first time, I was very interested to see how they would ask the question, and it made me feel good because I wrote an activity for TI, and I'll show that one to you a little bit later, and it matched, what we had to do on the exam. So I was very happy with that. And again, I wrote another one here, difficulties writing the conclusion for the goodness of fit test. It was, again, explaining what the answer was, because they were comparing mean and population, and students just struggled with, what does it mean to be a population? I think this one was about rabbits. They were comparing types of rabbits or something like that, and students just didn't know how to explain what the population of the rabbits meant. And so they struggled. So my recommendation to all of you is, if you get a chance to, focus on helping students with their explanations, definitely look at the mark schemes of the sample questions or the exam questions. If your school buys the whole packet, or if you buy the subscription, at Follett, and you can kind of, get those, all the questions that you want. Definitely look at the mark scheme and how the answers are worded, and how, you can help your students kind of remember how to describe in the IB sort of way. So that's what kind of stood out to me. Yes. $1 million question. Students will struggle to identify which test has to be used. I agree. And now that we have those tests, we have multiple tests to choose from. What I'm hoping is that it's written enough in the question that students can figure that out without too much difficulty. Because although IB likes to challenge, yes, there are some questions out there that maybe seem a little bit questionable, maybe, but I never see them trying to really, try to pull one over on the students. So I'm hoping that there's wording in it enough that isn't going to be a huge struggle, but I definitely understand that. I really do. Okay. Moving on here, because I want to get to some activities soon. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when we're doing the IA, yeah, we see a majority of statistics, and I know when they moved over to the math exploration, for those teachers who taught studies, they were trying to get students to not just do a statistics paper. And, unfortunately, I think it went from, if I was comparing going from a studies paper to a math exploration from, the 2 years before and after, I would say it went from 95%, of statistics papers to 85 to 90%. So there wasn't that much of a difference, because unfortunately, as I graded, I still saw the good old standard. Let's do a scatter plot, find the R value, line of regression, or chi-square test. That was basically it, So you saw that the vast majority of IAs with statistics. So what I saw this past year, I did see, like I said, a few more that weren't just statistics, but you just see what I just have, what I just mentioned here. One thing I'd like to share with you is that if your students are doing statistics, which is still okay, statistics papers are still good papers. I have, in my class, I have 3 or 4 of my kids who are still doing statistics papers, so I'm not going to tell them not to. But I also have a few kids who are doing a little bit of, kind of, map work with like Voronoi diagrams and doing some sine waves and cosine waves with musical instruments. So I do have some other stuff in there. So I'm okay if there's statistics papers. I just try to get them to dig a little deeper, because when we did studies papers, we were kind of checking off boxes. Okay, um, it's just unfortunate that you know it's it's frustrating to say that, oh, I'm going to do these many processes just to make sure I have enough, and then I'll do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I'll just glance over, just kind of the explanations, just barely enough to get in, and then be done with it. And so what I try to do, if my students do choose to do a statistics paper, I try to get them to dig deeper with it, go a little bit further. How is this information going to help us, in the future, or globally, internationally? And if you're doing something within the confines of where you live, how can we expand it? So I always like them to kind of dig a little bit deeper there. um, so looking at the first thing here, the one thing that frustrates me the most when I'm grading a statistics paper for the math exploration is the idea that if we're going to do a scatter plot, or if we're going to find the R value, or if we're going to do linear regression, there has to be meaning behind it. So I can't tell you how many students will just find the R value first and then just talk about the R value. There is a progression when you're doing a statistics paper of this sort. Okay, the first thing you must see is there any correlation? So you need to see that scatter plot first. So we are, I'm expecting a student to know that you start with that. And then if you do see a correlation, because if you have points scattered all over the place, you can use the R value to confirm that there's no correlation, but honestly, there's not much use of going further with that. But it should go scatter plot first, then go to the R value, which, I know that they say, having a 0.5 or higher, then you can kind of go further with the linear regression. I always like my students to get a little bit higher than 0.5, but, I'm not going to quabble over that. And then once they get a good R value, then they can find a linear regression. But then I can't tell you how many students just stop right there. Okay. What is the point of having a line of regression if you're not going to use it? Okay. And if you hear some frustration in my voice, it's because I am frustrated, because they think that all I have to do is make a scatter plot, find R, find line of regression, and I'm done. Okay, there has to be a use. And this is the idea of the math exploration, is that you have to dig deeper. How are you going to use the line of regression? What does that do for you? It does show you some trending. So what is that trending going to tell you with respect to whatever the topic is? So they have to take it further. They have to dig deeper with that. Okay. And so let's see what Michelle said. I have the same. Oh, yeah. Awesome. Oh, thank you so much, Michelle, because it frustrates the heck out of me. I hate taking off marks for students because, sometimes teachers just kind of let it go. And I don't know if it's their style or what they're showing, or if they're just letting the students do all the work and they're not really doing some checks with them, because we are allowed to give them some feedback, once on a rough draft. So I don't know their procedure. So I'm begging with you, I'm imploring you that if you are allowing your students to do this, that there has to be some depth to it, and there has to be some uses for this information. All right, the same thing with the chi-square test. It always frustrates me with they do all this scatter plot, linear regression, R value, that, and they said, oh, I'm going to do the chi-square test too. Why? They don't make the connection of why those two might be needed. I might see a few papers that do, but, you really have to have a need for those tests. It's just not, again, like I said with the studies papers, checking off the box that I did this, I did this, I did this. So they have to dig deeper with the math exploration. And one of the most frustrating things is when students find the mean, median, and mode. And they just say, here's my mean, median, and mode. Again, why did you find that mean, median, and mode? Okay, where are you going to use it? How does it progress the paper? just finding the mean, median, and mode, yes, we might need the mean for a standard deviation or a variance or using it in that, or maybe for a normal distribution if you're trying to do a comparison there. Or a median if you're using a box and whisker to do some comparisons of some data, that's good. But why find the mode? I mean, how many people use the mode? I mean, that's the other thing. So just there needs to be some meaning and some depth to why they are using it and how does it help the paper progress. So just, I'm sorry to get on my soapbox, but I've been waiting for topic 4 all year to talk to you all, because this is something that's been digging at me, every year when I grade these. So I want to share my information and frustration with you. Something else that I saw this year that I hadn't seen in the past, where there were more forms of regression. So I was happy to see there were some exponential forms of regression, some trigonometric forms of regression. So I did see some more forms of regression. So it was good to see that students were, branching out, to, other forms. It just doesn't have to be linear, which is nice. So I'm looking at just a question: if they don't dig deeper, where do they top out on rubric section E? So in the math section, I think it's pretty easy for a student, if I'm just going through my process that I have to go through to qualify to grade, and then the conversations I have with other graders, it's pretty easy to get a 4 for criterion E. So the students, they can, if they just show, if they pick a couple math processes and really kind of do the I wouldn't say the bare minimum, but just kind of stick with those, and they don't have to dig so much, they can easily get a 4 for that. But if you were doing the linear regression stuff and then the interpolation extrapolation, and then they took it to making those predictions and how it affects worldly outcomes, that's how they can then progress, to the 5th and 6th point there for criterion E. And thank you for the comments. This is awesome. Thank you for the eye roll emoji. This is awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for all your comments. I love it. I love it. I love it. And finally, what I saw is there were a few probability type papers. So students were collecting data and then using that data to use that as the basis for finding probabilities of other things. So, this is a big one. I spent the last kind of 7 minutes, talking about this. So, just, if you can help me out. I know we're only about 100 people here, but the more the merrier. Let's do it. So, and anything I could do to help. I think I've said what I could for that. So thank you so much. All right, so let's take a look at the calculators real quick. All right, and please, I think anybody who uses an 84 or an Nspire should be pretty well aware, with where the menus are, how to get to our functions. But just as a quick aside, I'd love to just kind of do a little bit of, checking out both the Nspire and the 84. And if I was prepared enough, I would have had these opened already. So I apologize for the extra few seconds that I have to open these. But, looking at, so just quick, I was working on an activity earlier in the week. Oh, and that just kind of threw me off. So would you believe what this, okay, it looks like I have a line of best fit there, which I do. But this is actually for a property of logarithms activity that I was kind of boosting up and enhancing a little bit. And I love that not only was I working with properties of logs, but I was also able to throw a little linear regression in there. And it's a pretty cool activity. It's like I said, I just finished updating it, so it's going to be, there's one on the site that I'll show you in a little bit, but it hasn't been updated yet, so I just updated it. But it was just nice to take, okay, I'm doing a section on properties of logs, but then I can combine it with some linear regression, which was kind of nice. So even though it's not a true statistics activity, it does have a little statistics in it, which I thought was kind of nice. So if you are an 84 user, where do we go, to find all of our statistical information? All right. So again, it should be pretty obvious. We go to stat, and if you need to enter any data, you're on your edit screen, you hit number 1, then you start entering your data. So yeah, these are all my data that I was adding for my activity that I was working on. So it's basically the logarithm stuff of the values in column 1 and 2. Column 3 and 4 are logarithms of columns 1 and 2. And so we can input our data there. And then if we go to our stats and then calc, hello. Here we have all of our statistical information. So we can do our one variable statistics for those, the mean, the standard deviation of one variable, stuff like that. We have our 2 variable. So if we're comparing X and Y, that sort of thing. And then we have our regressions. We have our different forms of linear regression. We have our quad, cube, all those different types of linear regression that we have that we can do from here. All right. And then we also have our tests. So if we go to our tests, you can so someone asked, how do we get this, this calculator on our desktop? So there are a couple ways that you can do that. You can, if you personally own, if you don't have your own Nspire, you can actually purchase an Nspire and then software comes with it. Or you can go to the TI website and you can get a free trial. Okay. So you can download the free trial and then you can purchase a license if you like it enough. Which is kind of cool. So you can go to the website and that'll lead you to downloading free trials, and then it'll also give you information on how you can get a license to keep it there. If your students ever purchase a calculator, the license actually comes with it. So they can actually have the handheld and the computer software. I'm helping one of my students right now. He is working, he's doing some statistics. And so we put the software on his computer and he's loving it now. That's all he uses. He doesn't use the handheld anymore. So on the 84 here, we have, all of our tests here. You do have your t-test, okay, the different types, 2 sample t-tests, okay. And then we have our goodness of fit tests, our chi-square tests. We do have these available to us. And then going through, if I go to my math section here, if we go over to the probability, here we'll find some probability information that can help us use with the permutations, combinations, factorials, that sort of thing. And if you do some random variable stuff, that could be useful as well. Just some different places that we can go. And then if you go to your Nspire, that's a little different. We have, the menu screen that then we can go to our probability. That gives us kind of the same thing that we did on the 84. But in addition, we also have that distribution on from this menu drop down. And we have all here pretty much the same thing we saw under the tests with the 84. Okay, so that's all there for you. And then we also have our statistics, which basically gives you our stat calculations. So just like we did on the 84 with the 1 and 2 variable statistics, regressions, all that is there. Now it does go a little, it combines some things that are on separate headings in the 84, but it's all there. Okay. So I don't think I can show you too much with respect to something you don't already know. I'm not going to show you something awe-inspiring because, we're doing, honestly, when you're doing statistics, they're going to ask you to do, some form of linear regression. So they're going to give you a table. You're going to input the data, find the line of best fit, find the R value, that sort of thing. Not too challenging. And that's just a matter of typing numbers in a list. So, and don't forget on our Nspire, you have a different page for, you got your list and spreadsheet. And let me just throw this out to you. I have this issue with my students quite recently. We just did this, what was called the phases of the moon activity. We're dealing with trigonometry right now. And I had students, who kind of unfortunately typed in all their data, but then they forgot to put their heading in. On the Nspire, you really need to put a heading in for that data. So don't forget to do that, with that information. Okay. And so here's where you put your data. And then if you go to another page called data and statistics, this is where you're going to put in your graphs. So you can do your scatter plots, your plot type here. You got your dot plot, box plot, histograms. You got a whole bunch of different types of graphs that you can do. I'm not, I'm an Nspire teacher. This is what I use. I just think the variety that's given here is a little bit more than the 84, but I think the 84 is a great calculator as well. So whatever you have in your classroom, you need to, really dig deep with it, because as you're well aware, applications and interpretations, you got the calculator the whole time. Okay, so they should be able to use it whenever possible. If there's going to be a, chi-square problem, and they are asking you to enter things, which they usually don't, because they usually give you that information now, because they've kind of they've taken that power away from the students. They've just given them, and then they want them to do more comparisons and answering questions about it. So it's really just the regression that's more that you're going to plug that into. But statistics and and probability, like I said, I love the Nspire for it. If you have a chance to use those, that's what I would recommend. But again, the 84 is wonderful, wonderful, wonderful calculator. And thank you, Ruth, for putting up those links there for that. With respect to the calculators, basically, you have your menus, you can model data. So the biggest thing for students, they think they have to rush through the IB exam. And I know it's timed, but I can't tell you how many times when I've graded an exam that students just rushed to kind of type things in, and they mistyped, and it threw off their equation, because they knew how to do it. They know how to enter the data and find the line of best fit or the R value. Okay. It would just be, you just got to share with them that, yes, we are crunched for time, but do you want to do, all, however many questions there are, 20 questions, you want to get through all of them quickly, all right, without checking yourself, or do you want to go through as many as you can, when you are just feel comfortable with them, and have taken the time with each of them? The students honestly will realize that they'll get through more than they thought, than having to rush through everything. So preach to them that, yes, you are under a time crunch, but it doesn't help you if you're speeding through these without really paying attention. And using, the handhelds on these exams, they're so helpful, and they do save some time. But if the students aren't taking their time using them, that's when the mistakes happen. So just kind of preach to them to take care when they are doing the problems with the Nspire or with the 84, because we don't want them to make those silly mistakes. That's the worst thing that could happen. All right, so to kind of finish things here, I'd like to kind of show you what we've been doing on the TI website. All right, so if you go to education.ti.com, all right, we have, under our either resources tab, you'll see IB resources, or under activities, you'll see IB resources. We have this, new site, and I'm going to keep calling it new until somebody tells me not to, because it is now almost 2 years old. So under this website, we have, 2 courses, the analysis and approaches, applications and interpretations, and we also have the live webinar link, okay, here that you can use. So if you click on that, that's where you go, and you'll notice that we do have 2 more webinars. We have on March 3rd, which is tackling topic 5, so calculus. And then on April 14th, which is just a few weeks before the exam, we're going to do some little exam tips and tricks, how can we use the calculators and what can we do just to prepare in those final few weeks. Okay. So just kind of that's on that webinar page. Now, when you browse the activities, you're going to see that there are two kind of drop-down menus. One is for the curriculum topic, so we are in statistics and probability, and then one is technology. So you pick whichever, if you're an 84 person, an Inspire person. If I'm an Inspire person, this is where I'm going to go. These are all the activities we have currently. And if you see new updated, those are the ones I've been working on over the last, I'd say, 8 months. And we've kind of updated them, gave them a little bit of an IB spin to them. So I'll click on sampling techniques, and what you get is a little overview, okay, of what you'll see in the activity. And then at the bottom, these are all the files that were created for this activity. You got a zip file that contains everything. You have a PDF column of a student activity, teacher notes, and an IB sample question. So what I did is after I got done creating the activity, I also wrote, a question to kind of give you one last boost, in the IB direction. And you'll notice that there's also a document column. So you got it like a Word document. And the reason we put the Word document is because we're giving you the freedom to adjust it however you feel. We have the PDF, so that's kind of set in place, so you're not going to change anything that's here on the website, but you also have your own Word document that you can adjust, okay? So if you click on any one of those, we also have, since this is an Inspire file, we have a TI-Nspire activity that goes with it. So you can, if you want to, you don't have to, you can send these or put these on your students' calculators, and they can follow along the questions that are on the activity sheet. So if we look at the sampling, so this is the sampling activity. I really liked this activity because, teaching studies and teaching Math SL, there really weren't a lot of questions on exams in the past about sampling. So when they added this feature, I was like, oh, good, I need to do an activity on sampling techniques. So basically what you would do, and it's basically testing their knowledge of the different types of samples that you can do. So we have the simple random sample, the systematic sample, convenience sample, bias sample, quota sample, and stratified sample. So we kind of go through, each and basically give you an example. So again, you'll notice it says move to page 1.3. That's if you wanted the students to use their calculator along with it. You can either manually put them on their calculators, or if you have the wireless navigator, you can send it to their calculators. And it gives you an example of a type of a survey or a random sample that they're doing, and that you have to basically figure out, or the students have to figure out, what type of sampling it is. Okay, so you'll notice it says use the list from page 1.2. That's on the calculator, which is this list right here. So they don't need to go to that page if they don't want to, and decide which is the best type of sampling that they could do for each example. And you'll notice that there are, if we go through, there are how many? 5, 6. Okay, so so there are 5 initial questions, and then we take it further. Okay, so what I like to do in my activities is I like to get students to talk. So a lot of my activities that you're going to see a lot of times, discuss with one another, or discuss with a classmate, or share with the class. So as part of the question. So if you're that type of teacher that likes your students talking to one another and talking, sharing out, that's what I'm trying to model my activities after. Okay. And then once you're done with the extension, you'll notice I gave an application. So I've given you further IB work, in this type of problem. So, and again, it models after some IB type questions, which again, I'm trying to help everybody as much as I can when I'm doing these activities. So as you're going through this, please let me know if you find any, for one, errors. I always find errors when I do this, and I apologize. But if you find any, just let me know. And that those are easily fixed. But if you think that they're good, let me know. If you think that they could be better, let me know. Give me some tips or ideas that you think might enhance them. I would love to see it. because we're all kind of in this together. So for those people who are having, excuse me, sorry. For those people who have Inspires, this would be your version. And just to kind of put the 84 users at ease, there is a duplicate, okay, of that in 84 form. So you'll notice that there is no calculator activity to go with it, but it's still the activity. It still basically goes through the information, okay? And so you get the same thing. Everything is the same. The questions are basically written in the same way so that if you're 84, you're Inspire, okay? But then it also gives you some information about the 84 instead of the Inspire. And so what I love and what I try to do, we don't like to leave you hanging on these. You'll notice that there's teacher notes, of course. So if we open up the teacher notes for sampling techniques, the first page is all about the background. You'll notice that we have the math objectives here at the top, some important vocabulary, okay? And then you'll also notice that I've listed the kind of concepts, the topic, and what section they are in. So you'll have that for some schools like you to list that stuff. Here it is for you. It tells you the files you're going to need for this activity. And then it goes through, of course, we give the answers to you, so you don't have to worry about that. But if you find something, maybe not right, because, we have several people looking at these, but hey, we may have missed something. So you can kind of go through. All this is here for you. We put in some teacher tips, just to kind of help you along. So this is at your disposal for both the Inspire and the 84. All right. And then what I try to do with all my IB style questions, I kind of show you the work with them. So I'm not just giving you the answer, so you can kind of see the steps that go along with it. And we also like to make a note that, IB is not endorsing this activity. We are just using information from IB courses to make this activity. So I just want to make that clear. All right. So that was one of the activities. I really like it. And I hope you do too. I hope we can get some use out of it. A second activity, and this sampling activity is a brand new one, so it's one I created on my own. The second activity I'd like to show you is chi-squared test. Now, this is one where I took two different activities, one that had, the goodness of fit, and then one that had kind of a, the test for independence, and I kind of melded them together, okay, and made them more IB enhanced. So now you can kind of see that we have some different varieties within this activity for the chi-squared, and you'll notice that the title is chi-squared tests. So this is this is one of our enhanced activities. So again, this is one where I combined multiple, former TI activities, put them together and made it a little bit more IB-like. One thing you will notice about all of the IB style activities is that I've tried to incorporate the IB style of asking a question, which is they don't ask a question. So none of these actually have questions in them. It's all written in the way of, not what is the null and alternative hypothesis. It is write the null and alternative hypothesis. So I've tried to put an IB spin on that as well, just so you can kind of get in the IB frame of mind. So you won't find any kind of question marks in these. But it goes through each of the chi-square tests. So this activity was designed to go through the different chi-square tests so you can introduce them to both of them to your students so that they can feel comfortable with it, so that they can use their calculators, both the Inspire, and like I said, the identical version is with the 84 as well. So you have access to that. So just let me know what you think. If you get to use it, please share with me because I would love feedback. These are new. So if you're using them, just let me know anything that you can because I would love to hear it. And once again, we also have going along with it, we have that was not the one I wanted. Where is this? Chi-square. So we also have the teacher notes. Okay. So we, again, like to help you out. So here's all the information with the teacher notes. Same thing we did with the last activity. So you have it all there for you um, at your disposal. Use it as much as you can. And then let me know what you think. I would love to hear. I'm going to post my email address at the end so you can kind of give me some feedback. I would love to hear it. I'd love to hear it. And then just to kind of show you real quick uh, with the IB question for every one of our activities. So here you'll notice I designed this activity to kind of be related to what you would see on the IB exam. You know, and this is kind of important. I'm glad we're kind of finishing with this right here. So they used to have students actually input this data and find chi-squares. You know, what is the value, that critical value? They don't do that anymore. They'll usually give that to you, and you'll notice that the questions they ask are 1 and 2 point types of questions, which is what's the null or alternative hypothesis? You know, what's the degrees of freedom? You know, then write down that test statistic, you know. So there's less, you know, inputting of information that the students have to do, and more just kind of explaining right yet and just applying it. Exactly. Thank you for saying that. So what I like about that is they're having faith in the teachers and the students that they would know how to find it. And basically, did I have a typo? Thank you, Michelle. I got to write that one down. Typo. IB question. Thank you so much. It's my superpower. I love it. Anyways, so these questions are basically, especially that last one, is state giving a reason whether the null hypothesis should be accepted. So students can easily say yes or no, but they want to see them actually give a reason, okay? State a reason why that is. And that's why I saw students struggling on the exam. And just kind of leaving it at that. So we are kind of coming here to a close. So real quick, does anybody have any, and you can type these into the chat, does anybody have any topic 4 activities that you'd like to see going forward? And as you're typing that in, I would love to hand things back over to Ruth so she can kind of finish things off for us. I just want to say thank you guys so much for joining me. Hopefully I gave you a little insight and a little help. I didn't soapbox too much. But Ruth, take it away if you're there.
I'm here, but I'm muted. Thank you. Thank you, Dan. And thank you, everybody, for all the great comments and questions. Keep them coming in the chat. Information on the screen about sharing what you're learning through social media. Webinar drawing, yes, tonight. A lucky winner. Yes, while Dan was talking with you, I used the random number generator on my TI-84 plus CE. Last time we did it on the Inspire, and tonight's winner is Jacqueline Perry. I look at the list of attendees, count down or up, and tonight's winner is Jacqueline Perry. Congratulations, Jacqueline. Jacqueline. I'm trying to type and speak. Oops. All right. So congratulations, Jacqueline. You will be getting an email from somebody at TI asking which model of the calculator you would like to have. So thanks for joining us tonight, and thanks and congratulations for winning that. And like a certificate of attendance for tonight's webinar. That link is coming through in the chat right now. In a couple days, you'll be getting email since you register. I don't know why that says topic 3 because it really is tonight's topic 4. Let me double check that link to be sure I have the right link. Yes, it really is the right link to tonight's webinar. The slide is incorrect. All right, and I made that slide, but the link is correct, and that's what was sent out in the chat. In a couple days, you'll be getting an email that says the recording is available, and also you'll get an opportunity to get the slides that Dan used tonight and any documents that Dan is sharing with you. All right. I think that's all I've got to do. We did the drawing and the link for the certificate of attendance. Looking up and down the chat, I don't see any questions for me, but lots of great comments for you, Dan.
Yes, thank you all so much for joining us. We'll see you hopefully next March, just in March, not the next March, just
March 3rd.
that's right, 1 month.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. You're awesome.